Spontaneous speaking video 71. A study was taken by Dr. Albert Mehrabian. He's an author of Silent Messages, and he conducted several studies on nonverbal communication. He found that 7% of any message is conveyed through words, 38% through certain vocal elements, and 55% through nonverbal elements, facial expressions, gestures, posture, etc. Now, apparently there's a lot that you can look up into this, but I really didn't need his help to understand the importance of nonverbal communication. A lot of you have already watched like several of my videos. I literally have a video on the 3 different types of texters, and then I also have a video on the importance of tact and tone awareness. Now, I am someone, and I believe it's due to my type being an ENFJ, but then on the other hand, I've met a few ENFJs who they say that they too come off like, not necessarily the best in tone or something when they are texting. While I've met other ENFJs who actually were FE users in general, who actually are really great with using a specific tone in their messages and everything. And I think that constantly being somebody who's just super aware and sensitive to tone and how important it is, like the nonverbal communication, like fluctuation of fluctuation, I don't know, can't pick up the word, but pretty much like how we use our tonality and everything. I have picked up a lot on how it's not as common for other people to use this, especially when it comes to like texting. Now, we have a lot of help when it comes to things like emojis, and we have like exclamation points and stuff like that. Like, I think personally I present the most energy when I am texting. I seem a lot more energetic in my text messages than maybe even in person. In person, I'm more like this, except for when I'm actually trying to put on a show, which you've seen in probably like other videos. Like, I have to keep you guys interested somehow. But but when it comes to text messaging especially, I've just found that people's tones can often be mistranslated. I was talking to Brandon, INTP roommate, or former roommate, who actually I just put out in video this past weekend, me interviewing him. And he said at one point that he never tries to like read into or look into like the tone of a text message or anything like that. And then I laughed because it's like, that's pretty much like all I do. And then on top of that, let me pull up this picture that I think I have ENFJ in real life. Yeah, here it is. And actually, I believe Heidi wrote it, and it's just so accurate because this was even before me and her knew each other, but it's just so accurate. It says, for the ENFJ, their online description is, ENFJs are the revolutionary world leaders who mentor others towards great change and was probably your high school valedictorian. And then a real ENFJ wasted his entire day trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind a friendly text message. That is me. I mean, I'm not as bad, clearly it's like exaggerated, but I may as well be. And I can only speak for myself as an ENFJ, not all ENFJs, but I just know that the way that it comes about with me, when I'm texting people, I literally hear their voice in my head. I hear their tone, and I try to do the same thing. That's why a lot of times in my blogs, for those of you who've checked them out, I think what makes me as good of a writer as I am, at least in that sense. Maybe I'm not like J.K. Rowling or C.S. Lewis type of writer, for sure not. But one thing that people tell me over and over and over again, like all the time, is that they can hear my voice as I'm texting them. Even sometimes to you guys as I comment back to your responses, and you may be able to hear my voice in those as well. And that's because I really try to put as much of myself into it as possible, if that makes sense. So, for example, commenting back to all of you on here, I know that you guys can't like actually see my expressions or something like that. So a lot of times I even wait until I can get on like an Apple device or something to respond to your text message. I mean, to respond to your comments, so that I can put like the emojis there and everything. So like for certain comments, then when I really want to use an emoji, sometimes it's hard for me to put it up on my MacBook. So instead I'll just respond off of my phone or something like that, because I just have to put that emoji there, because tone is just so different. Like one emoji can shift up the whole tone, at least in my mind. One punctuation mark can shift up the whole tone. Like even stuff like leaving a period out versus putting a period there, that shifts the tone. Like there's a difference between good morning, period, good morning, exclamation point, and good morning, nothing. And a lot of you are probably like watching this and being like, sheesh, like it's really that serious? Well, I've talked to a few other people and it is that serious to me, serious to them. And then looking at these studies, I think that also goes to show how serious it is, because we often hear that, and I didn't just do that whole math or whatever, but essentially 85 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. Just let that sink in. 85 to 90%, according to studies and everything, of our communication is nonverbal. That means that the verbal aspect of it is only making up like 10%, 10 to 15%, which either way, it's still low. There's so many other factors that go into it, and being somebody who I pride myself on communication and being able to express my thoughts and everything effectively, and being a good listener, I find it very difficult to effectively communicate with others when there are things in the way of that, such as lack of tone, lack of proper punctuation, lack of emojis, stuff like that. There's a reason why we have LOLs in text messages, even if we're not really laughing. I do not laugh every single time I put an LOL in a text message, but I still put those LOLs there because, what, Denzel, you're lying? Are you fake? No, it's because it lightens the text message, it lightens the mood in some way. It shows some sort of like warmth. It adds an element to that tone that's being said. All of this punctuation, ellipses, exclamation points, periods, commas, stuff like that. All of that is just very necessary, in my opinion, to make up for all of you. My goal, at least personally, my goal is to make up for all of the lack of nonverbal that I can give to you. So that's why a lot of times they say things like, it's best, like if you're gonna break up with somebody, then you should break up with them like in person, not over like a text message. Like it's so impersonal, the person might have to, and I know it's like hard, but like they might have to see your sincerity, like the look on your face. They might read a text message saying like, hey babe, I'm sorry, it's over, and you could be meaning it like, hey babe, I'm sorry, but it's over, or hey babe, I'm sorry, but it's over. Like there's just so many different ways that you can interpret stuff, and once again, a lot of you are probably watching this and like, well, how, like, I'm not responsible for how you interpret it. You're right, technically you're not, but would it hurt as much to like try and help that? Sometimes it's important. Like now we have stuff like FaceTime, we have voice text messages, stuff that can help us, with our communication. We have the emojis, we have punctuation, all of these different things to help our communication. And even just now, as I'm making this video, I just got into a discussion, not an argument. And if you go look at it on Twitter, that's why I'm saying this. Not an argument, but a discussion with a few other people about type stuff. And the whole time I was just thinking in my head, this would be so much more better handled if we could have had this discussion in person. Because especially like when at first it started off with just me and one other person, Megan Lavoda. You guys should all know her by now, but it just started off with me and Megan, and then it grew. And I'm not bothered by that. The only thing was like as it grew, then it became difficult to keep up with who was speaking and when. So like by the time like I would read and process an answer, then either the answer was not really complete, so there was a part two coming next to it that I didn't know, or somebody else is putting in their piece. So in my head, it sounded like we were all just speaking over each other. And then with me, someone like me, like I have to like back up from stuff like that. I personally enjoy one mic discussions. And I don't like talking over people, and I don't like when people talk over me. And like I said, they couldn't help this. It's Twitter, you know. Who would have thought that we would have been able to? You can't have like an organized conversation between several people on Twitter, with the limitation on characters and everything. You know, it's just a lot. So when it came to that with them, then I just kind of wanted to like back up so that I could process more of like what's going on. I just kept on thinking to myself like, man, once again, this would be so much better if it were in person. Because if it were in person and anybody started to like interrupt each other or whatever, then, you know, I could like kindly ask like, hey, could you wait and let this person finish? Like, oh, I'm talking. Like, can you please just let me get this all out before, you know, whatever. And then we'd be able to equally listen to each other while also like putting it out and like, oh, that's blah blah blah, you know, like, and it just makes sense that way. But you can't really do that on Twitter, like I said. You can try, like sometimes like I've seen people like put in parentheses like a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3, and it's like the 3 is like the end or something. But you can't always expect people to like know like you're about to end it. And so anyway, I think that I brought that up to say that having those in-person conversations really helps a lot, because then you're able to have one mic. You're able to fully listen to one person speak as they flesh out a thought. You're able to fully take in all of the information, process it, and then you respond. And it just saves so many words on top of that, so many repetitions, so many clarifications. Like, no, I already said that. Well, I didn't hear you. Well, you probably would have heard me if, you know, and once again, I'm not shading anybody. I'm not saying this is what happened like on there. I'm just speaking in general. I actually had the idea for this video written on my phone like over 2 months ago. And I just now had, I guess, that spark of energy to like be like, hey, you know what, I think it's time that I get to that video, because this is a perfect example. And even they said like, you know, this just would have been a lot more easier if like it were in person. I'm like, yeah, 300%. Cause yeah, I don't like interrupting people as they speak. I don't like when they interrupt me. And I like for us to be able to like fully understand each other. I like for us to not be speaking over each other. Even when we get excited, you know, like we can practice like self-control to like listen. I'm not saying that I'm perfect and I never interrupt people or anything, but I do try my best not to. And so yeah, so that's one, many reasons. And then another reason, once again, is like having an ISTJ friend that I always talk about on here. And she even said something like, she hates putting LOL in her text messages because it's like scratching a chalkboard. She literally said this. And I'm like, okay, can't relate, but all right. I guess I won't force you to do that. And she does, like, you know, even on FaceTime, like, her tone is not always, it does pretty much match the tone that she's giving in text messages. So it's like, okay, well, I can assume how this is being said. And she's not the most aware of her tone anyway. But for people who aren't really like that, I know a few people who are like the kindest people that you know. They're very aware of their tone in person, but when they're texting, it's like just really bad. And so it's like, okay, and you can, from misunderstanding somebody's tone, so many things can just come about. And even with Brandon and my other roommate, they even got into an argument one time. We were all in a group chat, and Brandon seemed as if he was being smart or sarcastic toward my other prior roommate. He's like, who are you talking to like that? And it's like, whoa. And then, but if this was in person, and then maybe my other roommate would have been able to like see at the time, like, oh, he doesn't really mean it like that, or he's not trying to say it in this way. So, anyway, the point of this video was just to point out the importance of nonverbal communication. We won't always be able to speak in person. You won't always be able to FaceTime. You won't always be able to talk on the phone. But keep in mind and understand how much of your communication is being lost because of these things. And then if you really want to be an effective communicator, I suggest that you put in the effort on adding that extra emoji, on doing better with your punctuation. Like, you don't have to put like 3,000 exclamation points unless if you're really just that excited. But then at the same time, don't just be dry with everything and then leave so much ambiguity and room to misinterpret that tone, because tone is important and there's a reason why. Tone is important and there's a reason why. Tone is important. There's a reason why. Tone is important and there's a reason why.